The last thing I remembered from my previous life was the blinding headlights, my mom's hand tightly clutching mine, and Grandma wheezing in the back seat as we rushed toward the hospital. Then came the crash. Everything ended there until I opened my eyes again. I was no longer a high school senior or a girl buried beneath a lifetime of grief. I was a child again, maybe 5 years old, standing in our tiny living room, staring at my mother Emily Carter, who sat on our old couch with tears streaming down her face, gripping a university admission letter with trembling hands. That letter was everything. Her future, her freedom, her dream. But in this timeline, she hadn't torn it up yet. Not yet. And I wasn't going to let her. She raised the envelope with the same despair I remembered, the same motion that had haunted me for years, and in a heartbeat, I ran over and snatched it from her hands. "Mom, don't tear it," I said, my tiny voice louder than I expected, trembling but firm. "You're going to college. This time, you have to." She froze, stunned, her eyes wide with disbelief. "Lily, sweetie, what are you talking about? Your dad just fell overboard. He might not be coming back. How can I go to college now? I have to make money, take care of you and Grandma." I hugged the letter against my chest like it was sacred. "Going to college is the only way we'll make money. Please, Mom, we'll be okay. I promise." My grandma, who we called Grandma Rose, shuffled out with her cane, drawn by our raised voices. Her eyes looked sunken from crying for days, but her spirit was unshakable. "Emily, Lily's right," she said hoarsely. "You stayed up every night studying just to get in. You can't throw that all away. I'm still alive, aren't I? Let me carry some of the burden. You go chase your future." I felt tears welling up, watching the two women who loved me most suffer in silence. My mom cried harder, her hands over her mouth, shaking her head. But she didn't reach for the letter again. That night, while everyone was asleep, I tiptoed into her room and found her rechecking our family savings. There wasn't much left. My dad, Daniel Carter, had already taken most of it before he disappeared. "Lily," she whispered, surprised I was awake, "we have no money left. He took it all. I can't go to college like this." I climbed onto the bed and put my little hand on hers. "Mom, he's not missing. He faked it. He went abroad to live with another woman, and they have a son, his dream son." Her eyes widened in shock. "Lily, what are you talking about? Did you have a nightmare?" "That can't be," but I kept going. I told her everything I remembered from our last life, how he'd left us, how we died tragically in that car accident, how she never got to live her dream, how she gave up everything for a man who never loved us. The more I spoke, the more color drained from her face. "That's impossible," she muttered, still clinging to disbelief. "He wouldn't do that. He wouldn't just leave you, especially not his own mother." I could tell she wanted to believe in him, but the cracks were forming. "Did you see his passport when you went through the drawer?" I asked. She paused, then nodded. "It was missing." I climbed down and pulled a stack of letters from the cabinet drawer, letters he'd forgotten to destroy in this life. I handed them to her. I didn't need to read them again. I remembered every line. I watched as her fingers shook, opening envelope after envelope. In his own handwriting, Daniel described his plans to fake his death, run off with his mistress, and start a new life abroad with his son. A son, not a daughter. Because in his words, girls are useless. The Carter family name needs a boy. My mom clutched the letters, her face crumbling into devastation. He planned this? All of it, she sobbed. I worked day and night for him. I gave up everything. I wrapped my arms around her and whispered, "That's why you can't waste your life on someone like him. Go to college. Change your life." That moment broke something in her, but it also rebuilt her. She nodded slowly, then held me close like she never wanted to let go again. "In this life, I will protect you, Lily. We'll both live well, I promise." From that day on, we didn't tell Grandma the truth. Her heart was fragile, and we didn't want her to know that her only son had betrayed her too. The next morning, my mom made breakfast and kissed me and Grandma on the forehead before heading out. "I'm going to class," she said with the first confident smile I'd seen on her face in years. "I've decided. If I got into college once, I'm going to make it count." Grandma stared at her like she'd seen a ghost, then smiled softly. You should have done this long ago. Maybe when Daniel comes back, he'll be proud to see his wife is a college graduate. I met Mom's eyes. We both knew that day would never come, and if it did, he'd regret every choice he made. Once she left, I picked up the dishes and began to help with the chores like I did in my past life. Grandma watched me and laughed. You're a clever girl, Lily. But school is your job. Girls need education too. Even she, a traditional woman, knew that the kitchen wasn't a girl's destiny. I swore to myself I wouldn't just rewrite Mom's fate. I'd rewrite mine too. No one was going to tell me girls were worthless ever again. The years passed quickly after that morning when Mom decided to go to college instead of giving up her future for a man who didn't deserve even a second of her thoughts. And from then on, our home was filled with a quiet kind of hope, one that grew with every scholarship award she brought home, and every night, she stayed up past midnight poring over textbooks while Grandma Rose heated up milk in the kitchen and gently nagged her to rest, saying things like, "Emily, you'll collapse before graduation if you keep this up," and Mom would always smile that soft, stubborn smile and say, "I'm fine, Mom, just a little more tonight." And even though Grandma called her a nerd in mock annoyance, we all knew how proud she was, especially when she'd sneak into Mom's room and leave warm milk and her old scarf on the desk like it was some kind of blessing for the finals ahead. And while Mom worked hard toward her degree, people in the neighborhood couldn't stop whispering behind her back, saying she was just going to college to marry rich and would forget about her daughter and mother-in-law. But Grandma wasn't having any of that. She marched right to their doorsteps with her cane and said, "My daughter-in-law got into college through her own blood, sweat, and tears. If anyone says another word about her, they'll have to answer to me." And when I asked her later if she meant it, she just chuckled and told me, "Lily, women belong in books before they belong in kitchens." Never forget that. And I didn't, because every night when I saw my mom bend over her desk, eyes tired but glowing with purpose, I knew I wanted to be just like her, and life wasn't easy. Not by a long shot. Money was tight, and Mom spent almost all of Grandma's pension on tuition, groceries, and rent. But she never let us feel it, and every time she brought home a scholarship check, she'd cook our favorite meal even if it meant skipping hers. And even though she acted like everything was okay, I could see the way her shoulders sagged when she thought no one was looking. And then one night it all came crashing down. Grandma collapsed in the kitchen while making tea, her cane clattering to the floor and her lips trembling as she tried to call for help. And I didn't even think. I just grabbed the heart medicine from the cabinet and shoved the pills into her mouth, yelling for Mom as loud as I could. And Mom came flying in from the bedroom, barely catching Grandma as she slumped forward. And together we tried to hold her up, but she was heavy and Mom was too thin from school and stress. And then, just when I thought we couldn't manage, the door burst open and there he was, Ryan Walker, Mom's classmate, the tall guy with a solid build who always smiled shyly when he saw us but never stayed too long. And without a word, he lifted Grandma into his arms like she weighed nothing and rushed us to the nearest hospital. And the whole ride there I kept praying we weren't too late, because we needed her. I needed her. And when the doctor finally came out and said we made it just in time thanks to the pills and the quick response, I almost cried with relief. And I wasn't the only one. Mom thanked Ryan over and over, her cheeks pink and her voice soft. And when he said, "It's nothing really, I just live nearby and heard the commotion," I could tell he was trying not to look too proud. But the way he hovered around us afterward, staying the night just in case something happened again, said more than his words ever could. And even Grandma, who always had a wall up when it came to strangers, especially men, gave him a polite nod from the hospital bed and said, "Young man, thank you, but you don't need to fuss. We can manage." But he refused to leave, saying, "I'd rather stay tonight. It's late and it's better to be safe." And from that night on, Ryan became a more familiar presence in our lives, always bringing snacks, helping carry groceries, or showing up just when we needed a hand. And slowly, even Grandma's frost started to melt a little, especially after Mom got her internship offer and Ryan got one too at a company downtown. And the two of them were always walking together, studying together. And when I teased her about it, Mom would just smile and say, "He's just a classmate, Lily. Don't overthink it." But her ears would go red every time I mentioned his name. And after Grandma got discharged, the house was warmer than I ever remembered, not just from the heater, but from the way laughter seemed to return, the way Ryan would drop by with little gifts, chocolates for me, soup for Grandma, fresh notebooks for Mom, and I couldn't help but wonder if fate had thrown us all a second chance, a better one. And as the weeks went on, Grandma started opening up more, watching TV dramas, gossiping about neighbors again, and even cracking jokes about how Ryan was too handsome to still be single. And one night, when I was brushing my teeth, I overheard her telling Mom, "Emily, don't be stupid. That man's not going to wait around forever. If you like him, don't waste time." And Mom laughed, but I knew she was thinking about it because she didn't protest, and deep down I hoped she would give herself permission to fall in love again, because she deserved it, and even I, a reborn soul carrying the memories of a lifetime, could feel that Ryan wasn't just any guy, was patient, kind, reliable, the kind of man you build a future with, not the kind who fakes his death and abandons his family. And by the time Mom graduated, she had job offers waiting for her, and we all celebrated at home with Grandma cooking her famous meatballs and Ryan showing up with a cake that said, "You did it," in frosting, and I watched them laugh together, a little too close, a little too happy, and I realized that maybe I wasn't the only one who got to rewrite my life. Maybe Mom did too. Maybe she'd finally get the love she deserved, the future she sacrificed once but wouldn't again. And I swore to myself that no matter what happened next, I'd protect this version of our life with everything I had. By the time Mom officially started her first job after graduation, it felt like we were standing on the edge of a new world, one she'd carved out with grit, tears, and a fierce refusal to let life break her twice. And even though the job didn't pay much at first, she poured herself into it the way she did everything else, staying up late to study reports, waking early to catch the bus downtown, and somehow still managing to make Grandma her morning tea before leaving the house. And I watched her shrink day by day under the weight of responsibility, her frame already delicate now beginning to look almost fragile, but her eyes, they never lost that determined glow. And every time Grandma scolded her for staying up too late or working too hard, Mom would just smile and say, "Don't worry, Mom. I'm building a better life for us." And even though we were all worried, we knew there was no stopping her now. Not after everything she'd already fought through. And Grandma, for all her toughness, often stared at Mom like she was both proud and scared at the same time, scared that one day this world might crush her daughter again, but still proud that Emily Carter, her daughter-in-law turned daughter, was now becoming the woman she was always meant to be. And as for me, I was growing fast too, getting good grades, helping out where I could, and learning from every little thing I saw Mom do. From the way she handled difficult clients to how she always came home with a smile no matter how hard the day had been. And Ryan Walker? He didn't disappear, not even after Mom politely rejected his proposal the first time, and the second, and the third, always with that same soft voice and eyes full of apology, saying, "Not yet, not until Lily graduates high school." And he understood, maybe better than anyone else, because he loved her for real, not out of guilt, not out of pity, but because he'd seen her at her worst and stayed. And during those years, he became part of our rhythm, helping Grandma take her evening walks, fixing our leaky faucet, bringing dinner when Mom had to work overtime. And somewhere along the way, our little apartment started feeling like a home again, not just a shelter from storms, but a space filled with love, laughter, and second chances. And 7 years went by like that, quietly but beautifully, until one summer evening, as I stood at the entrance of our new place in the city center, spacious flat with floor-to-ceiling windows and a skyline view, I realized that we'd really made it, and not just financially, though Mom was now a middle manager with a serious salary and real authority, but emotionally, spiritually, like we'd climbed out of the shadows and into the sun. And yet, even with all that, Mom never stopped putting me first, never stopped worrying about my studies, especially now that senior year was kicking my butt. And as the pressure of the college entrance exam loomed over me like a storm cloud, she did everything she could to keep me sane, hiring private tutors, preparing my favorite meals, even printing out daily motivational quotes and taping them to my mirror like a Pinterest mom on a mission. And whenever I started to feel overwhelmed, she'd sit beside me and say, "Lily, no matter what happens, I've already won the lottery having you as my daughter." And those words became my anchor, my reminder that even if I failed, I was still loved. And Grandma Rose, as feisty as ever, would march into my room every night with a glass of warm milk and remind me that a girl with brains never gets tricked by sweet-talking losers, which always made me laugh even as my eyes stung with exhaustion. And one day, out of nowhere, she slammed her cane on the floor and said, "You two don't know anything. Our old house is about to be demolished, and the compensation is going to be huge. I heard it's 8 figures." And when I looked at her, confused, she winked and said, "Don't worry, Lily. I already changed the name on the title deed to yours. It's your house Now, and I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I mean, yeah, our house was old and falling apart, but it was still home, and now it was going to make me a literal millionaire overnight? What even is this timeline? But I didn't have time to process any of that because the college entrance exam was right around the corner, and we were all walking on eggshells trying not to stress each other out, and on the big day, we woke up early. Grandma lit incense sticks at dawn like we were praying to every god ever imagined, and I sat in front of the computer at 10 a.m. sharp with trembling fingers as I clicked the button that would decide my entire future, and when the screen flashed 7:02, I screamed. Mom screamed. Even Grandma dropped her prayer beads and screamed, and before I knew it, we were all hugging in the middle of the living room, crying and laughing like lunatics, and Ryan immediately ran out to buy groceries, saying, "Tonight we're feasting like royalty," and Grandma smacked him on the head, saying, "Forget groceries, we're going out me treat." And that evening, as we sat down for a celebration banquet, surrounded by friends and neighbors who'd watched us struggle and now were watching us shine, I saw the pride in Grandma's eyes when she toasted to my brilliant granddaughter, who ranked third in the entire province, and the joy in Mom's smile as she whispered, "You did it, Lily, you really did it." And just when I thought this day couldn't get any better, couldn't be more perfect, the door to the banquet hall swung open with a loud creak, and in walked a man I hadn't seen in over a decade, followed by a boy who looked barely younger than me, and for a split second, time froze as everyone stared, confused and silent, and then the man dropped to his knees in front of Mom and cried out, "Emily, it's me, Daniel, I'm back. I'm so sorry." And just like that, the past we'd buried clawed its way back into the room. For a moment, no one spoke. No one moved. It was like someone had dropped a bucket of ice water on a flaming celebration, and the man kneeling on the floor, the man who had faked his own death and disappeared from our lives for over a decade, just stared up at my mom with teary eyes and a cracked voice like his presence alone was supposed to mean something, and behind him stood a scrawny, awkward-looking boy with dark skin and nervous eyes who was clearly his son, the one he had abandoned us for. And I felt a familiar rage boil up from my chest, the kind that only comes from remembering years of watching your mother cry herself to sleep while working 3 jobs, while your so-called father lived a new life overseas without even a single letter, and my grandma, man. Grandma Rose pushed aside the neighbors who were still holding wine glasses mid-toast, and marched up to Daniel Carter, like she was about to raise hell in heels, her cane thudding against the floor like a war drum, and she didn't say a word at first, just stared at him from head to toe with this mix of disgust and disbelief. Then, without warning, she raised her cane and smacked him right across the back, yelling, "You liar! My son died at sea a long time ago, and now you show up with a teenage boy and act like we're supposed to throw a party." And Daniel flinched like a kid getting scolded for stealing cookies, but he didn't fight back, just looked up at her with those pitiful eyes and said, "Mom, I swear, I was in an accident. I fell into the ocean and washed up in another country. I didn't remember who I was until recently." And I nearly choked on the audacity of that amnesia. Really? This man had written letters, signed plans, drained our bank account, and now he was pretending to be some long-lost castaway? Grandma wasn't buying it either, especially when she saw the boy Ethan. I assumed Anne turned to him with narrowed eyes, saying, "And who's this? Your travel buddy?" And Daniel immediately tried to smooth it over by saying, "This is Ethan, your grandson." Pushing the boy forward like that would magically fix everything, but Grandma scoffed. "I already have a granddaughter, her name is Lily, and she didn't crawl out of a betrayal." And just like that, the tension snapped. Mom stepped forward and gently touched Grandma's shoulder, saying, "Mom, don't get upset. We don't need to waste our energy on people who don't belong here," and turned to me with a calm but icy tone. "Lily, help me call security. This is still your graduation banquet, and I don't want it ruined by strangers." And those words hit harder than any slept strangers because that's exactly what he was now, a stranger with bad intentions and worse timing, and the moment she said it, Grandma smiled again like she'd just been reminded of who really mattered, and said, "That's right. Let's eat. We still have people to toast and plates to clear," and I watched as she turned her back on the man who once meant the world to her without even a second glance. But Daniel wasn't done. He lunged forward and grabbed Mom's wrist, desperate now. Desperate and panicking. "Emily, I'm Daniel, your husband. Don't you recognize me? I came back for you, for our family." And Ryan, who had been sitting silently through the entire disaster with his fists clenched, stood up in one swift motion, crossed the room, and pried Daniel's hand off my mom like he was peeling garbage off a shoe. and his voice was steady but furious as he said, "Let go of her. She asked you once. Don't make her ask again." And for a second Daniel looked at Ryan, really looked at him, saw the way he stood next to Mom like he belonged there, like he had been there for every hard moment Daniel skipped out on, and something ugly twisted on his face. "So this is it? You replaced me? I risked my life at sea for you, and you're shacked up with some loser?" And I swear, that moment right there made the entire room gasp, because my mom, the same woman who once kept her pain to herself and never raised her voice, finally snapped, and she laughed, this cold, bitter laugh that didn't reach her eyes. "Risked your life? You mean when you faked your death, took all our money, and ran off to play happy family with another woman? That life?" And when Daniel tried to deny it again, she pulled out a folder from her purse, proof, documents, bank statements, letters he left behind, everything, and dropped it at his feet like a mic drop. "The police already canceled your death record. I've moved on. This isn't your home anymore." And Ryan took it a step further, pulling her gently into his arms and adding, "You don't get to claim this family just because your other one didn't work out." And Daniel turned red with fury and shame, but he still had one more play, pushed Ethan forward again and said, "He's your son too, Emily. Don't be cold-hearted. You can't turn him away." And Mom looked at the boy, her voice soft but firm. "I don't know you, and I owe you nothing. Your father made his choices. You're not my responsibility." And that was the end of that. Security escorted them out while neighbors whispered and took sides, and I just stood there, watching the man who once told my mother she wasn't worth a college degree now begging her for a place to stay, and I felt no pity, only relief, because he didn't break us, just showed up too late, and we weren't the same people anymore. I thought that after getting publicly humiliated and thrown out of our banquet, Daniel Carter would have enough self-awareness to crawl back into whatever miserable corner he'd been hiding in, but no. Just a few days later, the man showed up on our doorstep again, dragging Ethan with him, and this time falling to his knees right in front of Grandma Rose, crying louder than before like that would magically erase everything he'd done. "Mom, I'm sorry I failed you, but please, if you can't forgive me, at least acknowledge your only grandson. Ethan is the Carter family's future. He's your only male descendant." And I swear, for a second, I thought Grandma was going to hit him with her cane again, but she didn't. She just turned her back to him like he was a stranger begging for change on the street and said, "My son died years ago, and I buried him with my own hands." But Daniel wouldn't give up. He followed her like a shadow. "Lily's great, sure, but she's a girl. She'll get married one day and take someone else's name. But Ethan can carry on the Carter bloodline. He can light incense at your grave when you're gone." And Grandma finally turned around and gave him the kind of glare that could end wars. "So you came back now just so someone could burn paper money at my tombstone? That's your version of filial piety?" And Daniel stuttered, No, it's not just that, it's also the house. I heard the old place is getting demolished. There's compensation, right? Millions maybe, and Ethan will need that money someday to get married, buy a house, start a life." And there it was, the real reason, not love, not regret, just money, and Grandma didn't hold back this time. She whacked him across the shoulder with her cane and shouted, "You greedy little coward. You think you can waltz back in here and take what doesn't belong to you? Let me make it clear, this house, that money, it belongs to Lily. I changed the deed years ago, and not a single cent will go to you or your bastard." And Daniel looked like he'd been slapped by a truck, his face turning purple with shock and rage. "Mom, are you senile? She's a girl. You're giving all that to a girl? What if she marries and her husband takes it all?" And Grandma didn't even blink. "I'd rather give everything to a granddaughter I raised with love than to a son who faked his death and ran off like a coward." And before he could protest again, she added, "Keep talking and I'll call Ryan. You remember Ryan, don't you?" And just hearing that name made Daniel visibly flinch, probably remembering the punch to the jaw from the banquet, and he grabbed Ethan and bolted like his life depended on it. But apparently humiliation isn't a deterrent for cockroaches, because that same afternoon he showed up at Mom's office like a one-man circus and started screaming in the lobby, pointing at her and shouting all sorts of lies. "This woman is my wife. She abandoned me and is now living with another man. She seduced someone higher up to climb the corporate ladder. You think she got that promotion by talent?" And suddenly, co-workers were peeking out of their offices, security was on edge, and the receptionist looked like she was about to faint, and Daniel was eating it up, thinking he had everyone fooled, that he was putting on some Oscar-winning victim performance. But Mom didn't even flinch. She walked calmly out of her office, looked him dead in the eye, and pulled out a folder. The same one she'd shown at the banquet, but this time with added documents, including a legal death certificate cancellation, property ownership transfer, and a police report detailing his years abroad and the debt trail he left behind, and she threw it at his feet with a cool, "You really want to do this here? In front of all these people? Okay, let's do it." And the office went silent. Not because they believed him, but because they didn't anymore. Because she laid out everything in a way that couldn't be denied: how he'd run off with another woman, drained the family's savings, started a new life, gambled it all away, and came crawling back because he heard we were finally doing well. And when he still tried to argue, I stepped forward, shaking but furious. "You say you're my dad? Then where were you when Mom skipped meals to pay for my textbooks? When Grandma was hospitalized and Mom sold her only watch to pay the bills? Where were you when I cried myself to sleep because I thought I was the reason she never went to college? You don't get to call yourself my father just because you came back broke." And the office started murmuring, eyes shifting from Daniel to my mom with a new kind of respect, and one of the senior execs muttered, "What kind of man does that to his family? Pathetic." And that broke him, I think, because for the first time since he showed up, Daniel looked genuinely defeated, his eyes wild and searching, like he was hoping someone, anyone, would still believe him, but no one did, not after seeing him unravel like that, and security finally escorted him out while a few coworkers actually clapped, and one said, "MS. Carter, if you ever need someone to testify on your behalf, we've got your back." And from that day forward, no one in that building ever questioned my mom's integrity again. But Daniel wasn't done trying to save his sinking ship. Instead of hiding, he doubled down on desperation, dragging Ethan around the city, trying to guilt people into giving him money. But when he realized no one bought the pity act, he made one last move, storming into our building again a week later, this time with a knife tucked in his coat and rage in his eyes. But what he didn't expect was Ryan, cool, calm, already waiting in the lobby with two of his buddies, and before Daniel even reached the front desk, they grabbed him, dragged him into an alley, and handed him over to the debt collectors who'd been looking for him since he skipped town abroad. And let's just say, the next time we heard about him, he was working 12-hour shifts in some illegal kiln. And no one, not even the police, gave a damn. And as for Ethan, well, he was taken to an orphanage under Grandma's suggestion, and I know that sounds cold, but it was the best place for him to have a bed, food, school, and maybe even a future. And Grandma even said, "If the kid makes it to college, I'll help with tuition, but that's it, we're done." And I respected her more for that than I ever had, because she still had the heart to be fair, even when life hadn't been fair to her. And in the quiet that followed, as Mom resumed her work, Ryan checked in on us more often, and I finally felt like the chaos was behind us, like we could start living for real now, without ghosts knocking on our door. After Daniel vanished from our lives for good, shipped off to pay his debts in some back alley labor pit that no one cared enough to investigate, it was like someone had finally peeled the last dark layer off our sky, and we could finally see the stars again. And the first thing Mom did after things settled down was sit me and Grandma down at the kitchen table one Sunday morning and say, in that calm but trembling voice of hers, "I want to marry Ryan before Lily goes off to college." And even though she tried to sound casual, I could see her hands shaking slightly, her thumb tracing the edge of the teacup like she was bracing for ejection. But Grandma just raised an eyebrow and went, "Well, it's about damn time." And I swear I nearly choked on my toast from laughing so hard, because deep down we all knew it had been a long time coming. And so a month later, after 7 years of holding back and 3 proposals that had been gently declined, my mom finally walked down the aisle in a small but beautiful ceremony with Ryan Walker waiting at the end of it, dressed in a gray suit that somehow made him look both sharp and soft at the same time, his eyes never leaving hers as if the rest of the world didn't exist. And I stood proudly between them as their flower girl, even if I was way too old for that role now. And Grandma sat in the front row with a tissue in one hand and her cane in the other, whispering, "If anyone messes with my kids again, I swear I'll haunt them from the grave." And as cheesy as it sounds, there wasn't a dry eye in that room when Ryan held Mom's hand and said, "Shinjin, meeting you was the greatest honor of my life, and I promise to love and protect you and Lily until my last breath." And Mom, with her eyes all glassy, whispered back, "Thank you for never letting go of us, even when I pushed you away." And they kissed to a round of applause while Grandma muttered behind me, "I'm watching you, Ryan. Don't think marriage gets you off the hook." And everyone laughed, even Ryan, who whispered to her, "I wouldn't dream of it, Mom." And from then on, we were officially a family not perfect, not traditional, but stronger than any bloodline Daniel Carter ever dreamed of preserving. And speaking of Daniel, he made one last pathetic attempt after he got out of wherever they'd stashed him, showing up near Mom's office with a knife tucked into his belt like he thought he was starring in some crime drama. But of course, Ryan had already taken precautions, had guys watching the building every day since the last outburst, and they caught him before he even got through the gate, dragged him into an alley, roughed him up just enough to make a point, then handed him straight to the last lone shark still hunting him, and this time he disappeared for good, like he'd never existed, and no one, not the neighbors, not the company, not even the police asked where he went. And as for Ethan, the boy who had been used as a pawn in his father's games, Ryan helped quietly place him in an orphanage where he was fed, clothed, and given a chance at real stability, and Grandma even told me in private, if the kid wants to go to college one day, I'll help cover tuition, but that's the end of it, no more ties. And I respected that because it was fair and firm and full of the kind of compassion you only learn by surviving betrayal. And with all the ghosts finally put to rest, Mom took a leap and started her own business, using the experience and connections she'd built over the years. And while others might have hesitated, she didn't, because she had already lost everything once and knew what it meant to rebuild from the ground up. And I remember her telling me on the phone one night, her voice low and full of emotion, "Lily, I did all of this so you could grow up free, without chains." And I told her, without a single doubt in my heart, "Mom, I've always been proud of you, and I always will be." And she went silent for a second before choking back a sob and whispering, "Thank you, baby." And from that moment, I knew she had finally forgiven herself for every sacrifice she ever made. And with the business thriving, she worked hard but on her own terms, choosing clients who respected her and setting boundaries that protected her peace. And meanwhile, Grandma had somehow discovered a fitness center that opened downstairs in our new building and became obsessed with watching the young trainers work out, especially the ones with six-packs and tattoos. And she'd sit on the benches pretending to read a newspaper while ogling their biceps, and it got so bad that one day they actually banned her for inappropriate comments. And when Mom scolded her, she just waved her hand and said, "Let me live. I already raised 2 generations. I deserve some fun." And honestly, who could argue with that? Especially when she started secretly watching YouTube videos of male models on her phone and got caught under the covers one night, resulting in her phone being confiscated at 10 p.m. sharp going forward. And as for me, I finally got into my dream university in Beijing, later got into grad school, and now I work in a scientific research institution where I study technology that makes life better for families like mine, because I figured the best way to honor everything my mom and grandma went through is to build something that would help other women escape the chains they were told they had to wear. And sometimes, when I'm alone in the lab late at night, I'll look at my screen saver, a photo of us 3 girls from that first banquet where I ranked top in the province, and I smile because we did it, we survived, we won, and no amount of pain, betrayal, or fake deaths could change the fact that we rebuilt our lives on truth, on love, on sheer stubborn hope. And while the world may not remember Daniel Carter or his excuses, it will remember Emily Carter, the woman who clawed her way back from nothing, and Lily Carter, the girl who got a second chance and turned it into a legacy, and Grandma Rose, who never stopped swinging her cane like a sword for the people she loved. And maybe one day, if I have a daughter, I'll tell her this story not to scare her, but to remind her that women like us don't break. We evolve.